All right, welcome everybody to our show. Uh, we have been doing several of these shows, and we've had all sorts of guests on who have been pioneers in the field of lifestyle medicine, who've done amazing work. But today is actually really special for me because I get to introduce somebody that I've known since I first started practicing nephrology, which was back in 2009. And, I'm delighted because this is somebody I've seen literally grow up in front of me. So, Hiral Patel was one of my very first patients when I started working. And I have seen her, I've seen her family, I've seen her grow up. And, all of the stuff that she's gone through, she has such an amazing and inspiring story. One of the things I believe is you have to have hope and you have to find people who are around you, who uplift you, who are able to show you that even in your darkest hour, you can look up. There's that one more chance, one more ounce of energy you have. So, Hero, I am, I'm delighted. I can't wait to get into all of this. Let me just start by asking you, tell me a little bit about who you are.
Well, thank you for asking, Dr. Hashmi. I'm excited to be on here. I feel like we've come full circle. You've definitely helped me with my starting my first support group, and now here we are with me writing my book and launching Antidote. So a bit about my background. Well, in regard to kidney disease, I was diagnosed at the age of 15, and I met you right before I got my transplant. So it's been quite a few years, at least 10 years now. But in regard to like my technical background, I studied anthropology and finance in college. But for the longest time, I had so many dreams and aspirations of like, okay, well, I'm going to be like a basketball player when I grow up and all of these different things. And then when I got diagnosed with my kidney condition, it seemed like a lot of the possibilities that I had envisioned for myself kind of just stopped. And I was like, okay, what does the trajectory of my life look like from this point moving forward? And I know there was a little security because the fact that my parents had established their own businesses. So it was like, okay, well, this is something I can just get right into. And I don't really have to think too far into the future of, what my career is going to look like. What am I going to build for myself? But essentially, I felt, connected with my diagnosis and, how everything happened. And I felt inspired to want to support other patients and to create a community where we're all encouraging each other and we feel empowered, versus feeling that, you know, we were labeled from the point of diagnosis and the label is going to provide the limitations and constrict what our opportunities are for the future. So essentially, me having all the different experiences that I've had and the different jobs you can say that I've had and the hats that I've played in my life, I'm at a place now with writing my book and wanting to launch Antidote Health that my focus and my purpose now is focus on supporting patients.
Kidney disease is such a scary word, and we talk about it from a medical perspective on what you can do to reduce your odds of having it, so forth. There are certain conditions such as autoimmune stuff where you can't. But what is it like as a patient to have kidney disease? What was it like when you got the diagnosis? What was it like when the questions of things like you might be going on dialysis came up? What was all of those? What went through your head?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult. I think the difficulty is, especially if you don't have the proper support in place. I felt when I first got diagnosed is interesting because the trajectory of my life to look pretty good previous to diagnosis, where I was like, okay, I'm going to be on the tennis team. I have these plans of like going into these specific, maybe applying for specific colleges or going to a specific college of my dreams. And all of these things I had planned out. But what I realized was when I got diagnosed, it almost became like where I was numb. I couldn't process anything. My life literally revolved around my diagnosis. So it pretty much felt like it engulfed my identity. I felt like kidney disease was my identity for quite a few years because I wasn't able to process exactly what I was feeling. Because at that point of diagnosis, I think I was about 20% kidney function at that time. And it was like, okay, well, at 15%, you're pretty much considered kidney failure, right? So it's like, what is the likelihood of me actually sustaining my kidney function, for the next 6 months, for the next year? Um, so I had the support of my family. I had the support, specifically of my mom wanting to like just jump right in and like, hey, let's take care of, your diet, and let's take care of like, your medication regimen. But I think with the mental support, I didn't really have that, where I can just go ahead and have the conversations of, okay, what is it like to have kidney disease? What does this mean for my future? And I think culturally, it was a little difficult because I feel like, speaking about Indian parents, because I am Indian, um, where I think there aren't that many emotions involved at times, and it's almost like going to problem solving mode, but not really talking through things. So my parents were there, I think physically, but like mentally, I feel like I didn't really have a lot of people that were there. So I almost felt like I was in my head, kind of having these conversations and thinking about these things where I was like, okay, well, if I had that one person I could connect with, that would make a difference. So that is pretty much the driving force in what led me to want to reach out and want to connect with community, because I just felt like I had no one to relate to and no one to have a shared or common experience with. And I really needed that emotional support. So I was almost on like autopilot, I would say, for the first 3 years of diagnosis.
So throughout that whole journey, because there are so many ups and downs, what do you think for you was the hardest part of all of this?
I think the hardest part was adjusting. I've realized after having conversations with different people that I was in a very, vulnerable stage in my life. Being a teenager, I feel like there's already a lot of things that you're dealing with being in high school. And there's so much that you're looking forward to that, I was already kind of planning my next steps. Like, okay, well, this happens next, which is like, okay, going to prom, going to grad night, having high school graduation, applying for colleges with friends. And there's all these things that I felt like were next. But for me, what I had difficulty with was I I didn't know what was next for me, and I had a hard time adjusting because I was in a stage in my life where there's so much more to come, but I just didn't feel like any of those things were available to me anymore. So the adjustment was the hard part, because I essentially took myself out of high school and then I became homeschooled. So I lost the social aspect, right? And then I lost different ways of really connecting with my peers. And then on top of that, having kidney disease and not really having anybody to relate to, it was like I'm fighting between two different worlds. And I didn't know which one I was a part of. Essentially, I just felt like I was in my own world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next sort of chapter that came up was you got a kidney transplant. And I don't think people realize that even after a kidney transplant, it's not like things go back. You still have so much stuff that happens. There's, blood tests where you're worried about rejection. There's medications. There's all this. There's a lifespan to a kidney, and they don't last forever. What is that post-transplant experience like? What was that journey like for you?
It's a great question. I feel like at this point in my life, it's almost 11 years in post transplant, that I've now come to a place where I can manage uncertainty. And I know in life, there's always going to be uncertainty, right? Like life is uncertain. We just create certainty in our lives by, doing different things. And I realized with my health, that was always something that I had a lot of uncertainty around, which gave me anxiety. So, for example, when I had my kidney biopsy done recently, it was like, okay, well, what does this mean for me? Okay, there's some scarring on my transplant. What does that look like? Does that cut down the longevity of my transplant? All of these things are unknown, right? No one has answers to these. But what I realized was, with uncertainty, um, if you can get past that hurdle and manage, you're living a much more freer life that you can deal with anything. And I think till this point, I felt like I was able to deal with everything that was coming my way, but I wasn't actually. And I realized with my health, being able to kind of let go of that control and being able to take on the uncertainty, I've realized that I'm living probably a better and healthier life because I've removed the stress. And the stress is the biggest issue because it just brings on, a lot more anxiety and a lot more stress of just like, what does that look like for my health? And post transplant, I think I already knew that like it's not going to go back to normal. Nothing's going to go back to normal. And I think a lot of times doctors will say right after transplant, like, okay, like you're going to go back to normal. I'm like, this is a new normal. There is no such thing as like back to normal, right? I'm living on immunosuppressants. Like that's not normal per se. So I think I already had the understanding that life wasn't going to go back to normal, but this was my new normal. And I was able to live within that and still live a freer life than what I had before. And just understanding that like life is not guaranteed in general. So just live as full and present as possible each and every day, because living from a state of fear and anxiety is not supporting us and really taking advantage of the second chance that we've been given. I think
I
that's the
think
biggest lesson.
that's really well said. So, that segues into something that I really admire about you, which is a lot of people when they go through tragedy, they'll take on an approach of why me, this learned helplessness, so to speak.
Yes.
But as long as I've known you, you're fierce, you're determined, you're not one of those people. And then I learned that you're writing a book. So tell me, what is this Antidote Health? What is it all about? What inspired you? What does it do?
Yeah. So in regard to the book, I did have my phase of why me, right? And I think everyone goes through that, especially in the beginning when they first get diagnosed. It's like, why me? Like, what does this mean for my life? And I think I dealt with that. But I feel like for me, writing this book, the inspiration and purpose behind it is to support people in understanding that, yes, you will go through the 7 stages of grief, right? And it's totally normal, but I want to shorten that period for them so they can see what comes after the why me phase, right? What comes after the phase of like feeling that you're in survival mode and there isn't an opportunity for people to thrive, right? So writing my story was, hey, this took me X amount of years to really understand and cope and really manage living with kidney disease. So here is almost like a how to, so that you can cope better and you can get to that place a lot faster. And I knew with me, my purpose lied with wanting to support patients. I just had a lot of fear holding me back. And I think a lot of it had to do with judgment of like, okay, will this be a success? Will this really support people in learning how to thrive? And wanting to create Antidote Health, which is essentially a community that is supportive and teaches people to be empowered and advocate for their health. That with writing Antidote, it almost relaunched my passion and connected me to my why. And writing my story was essentially, the beginnings, having kidney disease, wanting to connect with people, really not finding a community. And then, you and I had a conversation about it, and you said, hey, I can support you, I'll put flyers around and we'll have the conversations with different patients. And essentially that's how my support group started, which was almost 10 years ago. And now being at this place where it's like going from the support group to now, creating a mobile app where people have access to support essentially from anywhere. And main thing is accessibility, ease, and convenience, because a lot of times people expect or assume that, hey, I have to go into the hospital to get support. But recognizing that, hey, support is available to you anywhere you are, and it's accessible via phone or via website. And I think that's what really connects people. Connection is what gets people through tough times. And if people don't have support, around them, if they're not surrounded by it, essentially Antidote Health is there to uplift people and fill that gap for them.
So what kind of stuff will people be able to get from your? So I assume you have that website. I see the link up there. If you want to say it, in case people might not be able to read that, what is the website?
Yes, so the website is antidotehealth.io. And that's essentially me giving, different resources of local support groups. So if people want to go in person or get onto a virtual support group, I think that's essential because with COVID, I know a lot of times people feel isolated, especially patients, because we are, our health is compromised, right? And being on immunosuppressants myself, I realized I was being extra isolated, and it makes sense. But essentially, as humans, we need communicate, connection, and we need to communicate with people. So there are virtual support groups that are hosted locally. I know I have some that are listed in SoCal through Kidney Quest Foundation and through other states. So people can have access to that. There is also some resources about, a job forum. I have some articles that I've written about, explaining, how to read your labs, or what, how to really essentially understand the condition you have. And it's just a lot of tips and tidbits of just, living with kidney disease, but knowing what you're living with and how to actually thrive in your circumstance. So that's the website, antidotehealth.io. And then Antidote Health will expand into a mobile app, which will essentially give everything that you find on the website, along with the personal connections that you can make. When you're on the app, you can connect with individuals, and then ideally you can launch off into your own group and create your own group. You can meet in person. And what I've realized is that people want the opportunity to kind of create their own experience. And I think a lot of times what the resources are that are currently available kind of curate the experience for you. And I think that's the difference. As a patient, I've realized that when you go and you participate with some of the resources that are currently available, that they pretty much tell you that what you can and cannot say, and what you can and cannot do. And for me, what I want Antidote Health to be is literally any experience you want it to be. So if you want it to be a personal connection with someone, then you can make it that. If you just want it to be a resource that you can, tap into here and there, you can make it that. You can essentially make it whatever experience you want it to be.
I think it's such a gap, and having support is so critical in any one of these diseases. Kidney disease, unfortunately, it doesn't get the same attention as heart disease does or as cancer does. Not to say that those things aren't important, they are extremely important, but kidney disease ends up becoming one of these side conversations. And the folks that have it, we don't really have any strong advocates. So I'm so excited that you're taking this charge and doing this. And I want to highlight that, your book and, this app that you're creating, none of these are designed to generate revenue for you. You're doing this because you're passionate, you love this stuff, and you want to give back.
Yeah, exactly. And I know with my book, just speaking my story, I want to create the space for other people to speak their story and to share, because I think with cancer, and I think with a lot of the other conditions that are, highlighted and that people speak into a lot, I feel like, yeah, kidney disease is like the the black sheep per se, the one that's not really spoken about. And it's unfortunate because, you yourself being a physician, kidney, high blood pressure and diabetes are the two leading causes, right, of kidney disease. And that ties into obesity and, so on and so forth. But writing this book and talking about kidney disease, and just having the conversations, I think people don't feel comfortable sharing their story. And I don't know if it has to do with judgment, or if it just has to do with them feeling like, okay, well, this is a label that's on me, so like, let's just move on and we don't need to talk about it. But I think people talking about it will create a larger, focus and a spotlight on kidney disease, because it is a huge issue. And I think it's getting worse as time goes on. I think there are a lot more patients now that are younger than when I was diagnosed with kidney disease. So it's hitting a lot of different age groups, which I think is a big thing, because before, when I was diagnosed, I was the youngest patient you had. And I think a lot of times you had a lot of patients that were probably in their 40s or older. And I think now what I'm seeing is there are a lot of patients that are in their teens, that are kids, right? That are that have kidney disease. So I think it's nice to kind of pass, create that platform for them to speak up, but also kind of pass on the torch, because I think the younger generation are going to be the most impacted. And so just people talking and at least one person sharing their story, I think will get the ball rolling. So I think with kidney disease, it's almost like a do not ask, do not tell kind of disease. People don't want to talk about it. I don't know if it's people are embarrassed about it, or they just feel like, yeah, there isn't much information out there in comparison to, talking about breast cancer or some other form of cancer, that they just feel like, okay, it doesn't matter and let's just move on. So sharing my story is essentially, my goal is to create the space for other people to share their story.
I think what's really, really difficult in this process is your case was very different, but what we see in a lot of our patients who come to us in their 40s and 50s and 60s, a lot of the lifestyle choices that people make, whether it has to do with lifestyle choices that are poor, junk food, not exercising enough, not sleeping well, stress leading to things like obesity or type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is one of those things that we should be able to control well. And it makes it such a heartbreaking event when you see somebody go on dialysis because of something that they could have prevented. There's folks that go on dialysis because they have no choice. They didn't do anything wrong,
Yes.
right? It wasn't anything that was sort of in their um, surroundings or in what they ate. It's just one of those things where they got bad luck. But then there's other folks where just simple choices, and even folks who are about to go on dialysis, one of the things we try to tell them is this concept of support group is so important, because even if you're on dialysis, the risk of dying on dialysis, the 5-year risk of dying is 50%. It's 20% each year. 1 in 5 on dialysis die every single year. The ones that die are the ones who have very poor support, are the ones who continue to eat the way they did before. The ones who are able to be successful are the ones who make healthier choices. But to do that, you have to feel like there's hope. It all begins with this 4-letter word, hope, which is why I'm so fascinated by this stuff that you're trying to do, because having a community, having a group to be able to talk through this helps. When you were, not yet on getting the transplant and you didn't know if you were going to get it or not, what do you think helped you? Because, when you and I used to talk, I always knew you were eating really well, you were moving, you were reducing your stress. What do you think was that one or two key things that really help you to stay on track?
I'm glad you mentioned hope. And I think another thing is just the person as an individual, I think just recognizing that like they are capable, and just having that internal motivation, right? I think it's different to have the external motivation, but I think it's a little different to have the internal motivation. So like what drives you? And I think connecting to like what you see for yourself in your future, and knowing that there's more for you that's to come, versus essentially this being the end of it, right? And I think that ties into hope, because I think a lot of times when people give up and they don't see anything past what they're currently dealing with, that that's where they draw the line and they say like this is the end point. But I think anytime when someone sees a lot more for themselves and knows that they will push past this, and this is just one thing that's currently, happening in their life, or that is an aspect of their life, that ties into hope, and knowing that there's so much more for them to come. And I think for me, yes, it did help to have my family there to encourage me and to, kind of rally around me. Because when I got the transplant call, I think at that point I already had the surgery done for PD dialysis. And then it was like, all right, well, there's someone in front of you, so you're not going to get a transplant today. I was like, okay, well, let's just process that today and then move on, right? And then it was the downtime of still recovering from my PD my PD surgery where I got the second call and I was like, okay, no, this time it's time to go. So it was a very confusing time. I know between me getting the dialysis surgery and me getting the transplant, which is a very short window. But I always recognized that I was going to fight and I was going to continue to, go after the things that I had envisioned for myself. So I think when people really connect to themselves and, the the goals they have for themselves, the dreams that they have for themselves, and recognize that, like, yes, your dreams do not end once you get diagnosed. Life continues on and moves forward. It's now your choice to decide how you want to use that time and how you want to push forward, right? And I think for me, I knew, like, hey, whether I was going to college on dialysis or if I was going to college with a transplant, either way, I was going to college. So I knew what my next steps were. And I think that's what got me going, because I recognized that kidney disease was not going to determine the trajectory of my life.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing. And that's what I touch on actually a lot in Antidote. And you kind of see the resistance of me kind of fighting the label or almost the system, because I had a lot of times where people were like, well, this is your situation. Like, now, like, learn to manage with your situation, right? And I was like, this is my situation. I will figure out how it works within my ecosystem. But also, I'm going to continue pushing forward and pushing past those labels. And I know a lot of times people, especially with my age, I think I wasn't really so sure of myself. But I think with the activities that I've gone through, is like, what do you value? Like, what are your goals? What are your aspirations? What do you see for yourself? And I think when people really hone in on that, that's what they stay connected to, and that's their why, and that's what gets them pushing forward. So I think a lot of times people don't have the tools, right? So it's like building that toolkit or building that tool set to get you past whatever obstacles you're dealing with, whether it's day to day or whether it's long term.
You know, speaking of goals and why, so let me put you on the spot a little bit, because when people are listening to this, some people, they don't understand how much of a time commitment kidney disease is. Dialysis, for those who don't know, when we do the blood kind of dialysis, you're talking 3 to 4 hours, 3 to 4 times a week.
Yeah.
And that's a massive commitment. And every time you go, they're putting two very large 15 gauge needles into your arms. PD, which is the stomach kind of dialysis, or what we call the water kind of dialysis, you're hooked up to a machine potentially all night long, and then you have to do manual exchanges throughout the day. So this is a massive commitment, and it derails so many people. I see so many people in our dialysis units who don't have hope, who don't want to listen to anything that we're saying, because they say, what's the point? I'm already on dialysis.
Yeah.
And so we respond by saying, the point is it's not over. And the decisions you make is what's going to allow you to continue to have a full, rich life. So
Exactly.
speaking of fullness and richness and goals, what's your 5 year, 10-year vision? What do you want to do sort of on a bigger scale? What's your vision around all of this?
Yeah. So in regard to Antidote itself, the vision I have is it's pretty expansive. So I definitely like to add on another book, but children's book, and touching on children and kids going through something traumatic like kidney disease and a diagnosis, but Antidote Health itself. So I want it to be including the mobile app where it's supportive to patients and it creates the community and engagement. But also I want it to be, almost like a course where it's like, yeah, you can come here and, like, what are your goals? Let's talk about your goals. Let's have conversations about it. And with your current circumstances, let's see how we can, create the win-win, create the ands, right? And support people in a capacity where it's up on a personal level and achieving their goals and creating that, base for them to build themselves on. Because a lot of times I think you kind of just get passed on from one person to the next, almost like you're going from this doctor to the next doctor, right? But I think the other gap is to engage with social workers at dialysis units, at hospitals, because the social workers are essentially the connection between the patient and the resource. The social worker is a very critical person. So engaging social workers in understanding like how to find resources, hopefully incorporating our resource on a more institutional level, so that people know once you get diagnosed, having the education of once you get diagnosed, that yes, you will get referred to a social worker, but where does that social worker go to? And knowing the social worker can go to a whole access of resources that they can tap into to support the patient, whether it's achieving their goal of getting surgery done, then hey, let's connect you to a proper nutritionist, or whether it's a goal of getting support with their mental health, hey, let's tap into getting you connected with a therapist that's on a similar, that's aligned with you, right? Because not every therapist is someone that you're going to get connected with, so finding somebody that you can get aligned with. So Antidote could be a vetting process of vetting different vendors, vetting different personnel to see who would be compatible and that would work essentially for a patient to support them in meeting their goals. So having the right resources in place where we are the go-to platform or resource per se, that if a patient were to get in contact with us, we will fulfill whatever their need is and we will get them to their end goal. So we want to be an all-encompassing platform where we approach it in a holistic way, where it's your physical, your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual health. Because I think a lot of times the emphasis is on the physical health, but once you get diagnosed, what happens after, right? How do you cope? How do you achieve your weight goal? How do you achieve your physical goal? How do you achieve your mental goal? And I think a lot of that just gets forgotten about. It's like, okay, you got diagnosed, or this is a conversation you have with your physician, but like off you go, we'll see you in 3 months. But what happens between the doctor's visit and the 3 months, right? So we want to fill that gap. We want to fulfill all the needs that a patient has and support them in living a richer, fuller life.
So let me ask you a little bit of a different question. We have a lot of doctors who are listening to this. We have dietitians who are listening to this, social workers. So we get a lot of healthcare folks also listening to this show. As a patient, what do you think are things that all of those folks, whether it's your regular doctor, it's your kidney doctor, it's a dietitian, social worker, give me some concrete things that you feel like they should either ask or do for patients that are going through this journey of kidney disease? Because at the end of the day, all this stuff is about helping people, and even healthcare educators is about how can we all get better too. So from a patient perspective, what would you say?
I'm glad you asked that question because I have conversations like this with other patients. And I think the biggest thing is asking, how can I support you? And I think that's maybe like the tiniest question, or maybe like the simplest question anyone can ask. But I think a lot of times people go into problem solving mode, but they don't really ask, like, hey, how can I support you? And at that point, I'm sure the person will probably say, hey, I'm not feeling so good, or hey, I'm dealing with some depression. Yeah, maybe you can't support them into going in the specifics of it, but you will know, I can refer you to my 5 different colleagues that are therapists that can support you. So I think the biggest question is, how can I support you? Because that, I think, unveils or kind of creates a space for someone to speak their truth, versus going in and saying, hey, I'm not doing so well, I have depression, can you help me? Not too many people are going to approach you that way. And I think that goes with anyone, whether it's a doctor or it's a social worker. I know the social worker's role is to essentially connect the patient to resources. But I feel like now I think it's kind of been blurred for me more recently, where I'm not really sure what a social worker's role is anymore. Because I think now they've become so overwhelmed with patients that for them it may even become very systematic, and what's the most efficient way of doing things is by just referring them to whatever list they have, but not really going in depth with, let's have a conversation. Because I know there are with social workers, there is a capacity of having those conversations of, okay, how are you feeling emotionally, how are you feeling mentally? And I think that is kind of being forgotten about. And now it's just like, let's push you towards the resources that are outside of us and our institution to get you the support you need. But it's like they could essentially be that support or step one of support. So asking questions versus just throwing information at a person. Yeah.
That is very, very valuable. I love that. How can I support you? That's powerful. That is.
It is very powerful. Powerful. I caught COVID actually in December, and we had this conversation because I was talking to you about it. And I had so many people reach out to me randomly, right? Once I had said that I had caught COVID. This was on social media, but there were only a few people that asked, "Hey, how can I support you?" And I was like mind blown, right? Because I think we live in a society where it's like, okay, let's refer you to somebody else. Let's go on to the next thing, right? But I think it takes a very personable person or someone that is really passionate or really dedicated to what they do to really, um, or that is very connected to really just stop and pause and say like, hey, how can I support you in this moment? So I think just having the awareness that yes, we do have a role as a physician or as a social worker, but we're also human beings, and just getting very personal and just humanizing the experience, I think, is essential.
That's fantastic. Well, I tell you, this is amazing. I want to thank you. This has been delightful. The closing question that I always ask every single one of our guests is to part with some kind of tips or advice or your final thoughts on something that would really help people to who are maybe struggling or who may be losing hope to regain some of that hope.
Yeah, I would definitely say I know this is speaking into personal experience, but connecting to your why. I feel like everyone has a purpose, and I feel like everyone has, dreams and aspirations. So I think really connecting to that, and yes, you are in a moment where you are vulnerable and you think there isn't anything outside of this, but there's so much more to life, and there's so much more that's going on aside from the current experience that you're dealing with. And I think if you tap into your why, and you tap into why are you here, why, who are the people that matter to you, what are the things that you want to create, that will be your driving force, and that will be essentially the reason that keeps you going and provides hope for you. And I think when you don't have that, that makes it difficult. But talk to people about it, get connected with people online, come on Antidote Health. I have social platforms set up. You can literally message me anytime and I will have a conversation anytime you want. But yeah, finding a good group of people that you feel connected to, whether it's family or that whether it's people online. Um, but just having at least one or two go-to people that you feel like you can talk to. And if you don't have that, there's an opportunity to create that. But I think that starts with you and just wanting to share and have a conversation. So it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to share, and it's okay if you face judgment. But just know that your point in doing all of this is because you're going to gain something out of it, and it's going to support you long term. So don't think about the short term stuff, and don't get too tied down into the analyzing it all and getting anxious about it, but just recognizing like, hey, there's a lot more available to you, and you have a bigger purpose here on this earth. So don't get too bogged down with your current circumstance. There's a lot more available to you, as soon as you shift your perspective and you shift your mindset.
Well, this is amazing. I get a little emotional about this because I think the world of you, and it's been an honor and a privilege to have a small part in all of these amazing things you're doing. I can't wait to support you in all of this stuff. I can't wait to see all of the great things you're going to do. For the folks watching, please check out her website, Antidote Health. The links will be available for you guys to do so. This is wonderful. Hiral, thank you again. And we look forward to having you back on the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hashmi. I'm looking forward to it. I really appreciate your time.